Hi, everyone. Thank you very much, CASCA, for this award. It is really a huge honor for me to receive it this year. In my talk today, I'd like to tell you about my work as a science communicator, how it is really a passion for me, how I do think it's a necessity in today's world, and how it can be a very rewarding career. I do enjoy going to CASCA, usually in person, the CASCA meeting every year, because I get to meet very passionate people. It's always great to hear you talk about your research. Obviously you love it and you're passionate about it. So I'm hoping to do the same here and show you how I'm passionate about my work in science education. I know I won this award mostly for my work with Discover the Universe, a program we started almost 10 years ago, and I'll tell you more about it a bit later, but I just want to tell you a little bit in case you don't know about Discover the Universe. It's our program, actually, our mandate is to support science education by providing free, easily accessed resources for nationwide teacher training in astronomy. So we're a bilingual program. Our goal is to help mostly K to 12 teachers help in their astronomy teaching. We also help educators in informal settings such as youth groups or science centers. And one fun thing I like is that because it's free and online, we're actually reaching across the borders. I know some of our resources, for example, are used in African countries and different countries around the world, especially in French, because we don't find so many resources in French online. So it's kind of fun to know that we're having an impact in astronomy education in Canada and in other countries as well. Before I tell you more about Discover the Universe, though, I want to tell you a bit how I came to run this program. And I feel very lucky that I started my career in astronomy, in a sense, by working in two observatories in two different parts of the country, Montmégantic in Quebec and then the DAO in Victoria. So I got a summer job at the Astrolab in Montmégantic, the interpretive center, between Cégep and university. And to me, this was so inspiring. It was really an eye-opening, to the world of science and of astronomy training and astronomy education. So if you've never been there, actually, the Observatoire du Mont-Mégantic in the Eastern Townships in Estrie in Quebec, it's such a beautiful place. First of all, it's in a provincial park, so it's a beautiful mountain. And there's obviously a lot of research happening there, but there's also amazing science communication. And the Astrolab, which is the interpretive center at the base of the mountain, it's where I worked one summer, and they still do an amazing job in science communication. I'm a huge fan of what they do. And if you get a chance to go there, this is really, in terms of different places I've met where they do science communication and astronomy, it's really way up there because I think they have very high standards and they do a great job. So I got lucky. I worked there one summer. I feel very privileged to have been able to do that. I would have worked more, come back every summer, actually afterwards probably, but I decided to move across the country and go study at the University of Victoria in British Columbia. And there I got to work at the Dominion Astrophysical Observatory for a few years. And I'm very thankful for all the experience I gained there in terms of outreach. I also worked at the Center of the Universe, the Interpretive Center, when it opened. Unfortunately, it's closed now. But I got to run many of the public observing nights on Saturday evenings. Actually, this picture, I hope I gave the right credit. I believe this is from David Lee from the time I was there. And if it's the picture I remember, I was actually the one in the dome that night taking pictures with the 1.8 meter telescope and projecting the images on the wall of the dome. So that's the light you see in the dome, actually on the top floor, it's from the images being projected on the wall and having, dozens and sometimes even hundreds of people with me there. That was an amazing experience, and I'm so thankful for everyone who helped me there. I know two of them passed away, unfortunately, Doug and Les. They really helped me learn about how to use a telescope and how to do all this. David Bolander, I'm very, very grateful to you for everything you've taught me in terms of using the telescopes as well and the experience I gained with you. So many people have influenced me throughout my career. I'm sorry if I forget some of them, but that time at the DAO was very, very interesting for me. And what I learned from my time there is that there's amazing research being done by Canadian astronomers. It deserves to be shared with the public, and Canadians should know about it. Unfortunately, when we talk about astronomy in Canada, or in general, people think NASA right away, as if NASA has the monopoly of astronomy. Amazing research, right? And I think you are all doing great research, and people should know about it. And That's something I'm very proud of with Astro at Home, which I'll tell you a bit later. The latest program that we're still running, is that we got to showcase a lot of the researchers that are here and some of the amazing expertise we have in Canada. And yeah, I feel like it needs to be known, so I'm happy to contribute to that. Now, why I do what I do. This is a very bad model, but I'm not really good at graphics and PowerPoint, so bear with me. But I remember thinking when I was at the DAO that what scientists know, I mean, the level of knowledge that you talk about in conferences such as this one, like the CASCA meeting, it's pretty high compared to what the rest of the population knows. There's a huge gap in between. And I mean, obviously, you know a lot more about astronomy and that's your expertise. So it's normal that you know more than the population. But I feel like this gap is too big. When you do research, what happens is that you increase a little bit the level of what, I guess, scientists or humanity as a whole knows. But the rest of the population is a bit left behind, right? It doesn't know as much. And for some of the population, I mean, things as simple as what's the difference between the solar system and the galaxy, it can be tricky for them. So what I'm passionate about is actually doing this. Instead of increasing the research, increasing the knowledge that we have by research, which is completely, a worthwhile endeavor, obviously. But what I'm passionate about is trying to make making this gap a bit smaller and bringing the level of knowledge from the rest of the population a bit higher and closer to what scientists know. So I hope this is a model that makes sense, and to make a bit of difference between maybe what most of you do and what I'm passionate about is in sort of increasing the level of knowledge of the rest of the population. But this brings an interesting question, and kind of sounds like an existential question. Actually, it was for a while. What am I in terms of as a career name? I remember when I worked at the observatory in Victoria, people would come up to me and ask me if I was an astronomy student. And for many years that made sense because, I was a student and I looked pretty young. But when I stopped being a student and kept doing this work because I loved it, people were still asking me if I was a student. And yeah, I looked young, but at the same time I was thinking, why do people always assume I'm doing this before doing another career, right? Why can't I do this as a career itself? And that was a bit weird. It was like there's no real term for this. There was none at the time anyway. And people were always asking me if I was an astronomer. And sometimes I had a hard time saying where I fit in this picture here. I was not a professional astronomer or researcher. I was an amateur astronomer in the sense that I love looking up at the sky, but I worked in the field. So amateur astronomer usually think of it as a hobby. So I worked in the field. So where am I in all of this? And it took me a long time to realize that maybe I can just, instead of this being a line and being somewhere in between there, maybe I could make this line actually a triangle and say I'm an astronomy communicator. And that is a career in itself. But the thing is, especially at the time, now people tend to say science communicator a lot more. It's kind of converging towards that term. But for a long time, there was no name for it. EPO professional, science educator, even in French, it gets confusing, vulgarisateur scientifique. So for me, it took a while actually to find a name for what I did and explaining people what I did, and that it was not just something I did on the side while studying astronomy. It was actually a career choice. And just to let you know a bit of how weird it was, in terms of the names of what we do, CASCA has the Education and Public Outreach, or EPO committee. And I personally love the term EPO professional. I don't think it's used that much anymore. This is actually a website from, you can see, 2005. But when I first went to a conference in the United States and I heard the term EPO professional, it finally made sense to me. I felt like, yes, I'm a professional in what I do. And it gave me a title to what I did that gave it sort of credibility. However, when you talk to the public and said, I'm an EPO professional, they had no idea what I was talking about. So it always took 5 minutes to explain what I did. So things evolved and things changed. Now, here's Laurentian University, they actually have a master's in science communication. But then if we look at the ACTUA group, then we say, they're Canada's largest STEM outreach organization. So STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. We do a lot of that, see a lot of that as well, STEM outreach groups or STEM outreach professionals. There are so many terms and it gets confusing. And even in French, there are many, many different terms you can use. Pendant longtemps, on disait vulgarisation scientifique, mais on dirait que les gens, j'ai l'impression que les gens se tassent un peu de ce terme-là, peut-être parce qu'avec vulgaire, ils aiment moins ça. On a éducation scientifique, médiation scientifique. Dernièrement, j'ai l'impression que le terme rayonnement scientifique prend beaucoup de place. Puis c'est peut-être un beau mot, j'ai un peu l'impression que ça doit mêler les gens. Le rayonnement scientifique, ils pensent peut-être qu'on les irradie, je sais pas. Il y a beaucoup de mots différents qui est utilisé. Il y a l'association des communicateurs scientifiques. And I'll switch back to English now because science communicator, I think for a long time that was more for journalists. But I like that, actually I forgot to put where that was from. The second screenshot there is from Université Laval. And they do have a program where you can study, actually a graduate level program in communication and scientific journalism. So they tend to be separate now. But for a long time, I think science communicators was a term that's mostly used for journalists in general. Anyway, that's my feeling. But as you can see, it gets a bit confusing. It kind of goes in all different places, different terms. It's hard to say exactly sometimes what you do. I like the fact that just in the last few years, I would say, or even the last year, science communication, communication scientifique seems to be the term that's like everybody's converging towards that. And I like that it has a title now. It seems to be more recognized seriously as something that's worth doing, as something that's a career. So yeah, I'm loving that, actually, seeing that. And, you know, the SciComm hashtag on Twitter is pretty, people use it a lot. So there's a lot happening. I feel like it's bubbling with new ideas. And I'm very, very excited to see that. I must admit, I sometimes felt alone. If I go back 20 years, maybe there were, obviously there were a lot of other people doing the same job I did. Maybe because we didn't have social media, we didn't connect as much. Most of the people who I worked with who did some outreach were professional astronomers doing that on the side, doing outreach on the side. Some of the mentors who had been doing it. So it felt a bit different than from my own career path, because pretty early on I realized that research is fascinating, but it's not for me. Like, I enjoy doing the outreach part or science communication part of it a lot better. For many people, though, science communication is still something they do on the side as volunteer work. And I'm really thankful that many people do it as volunteers. I think it's great, and thank you for sharing your time for that, giving your time for science communication. However, sometimes it gives the feeling that it can be done, since it can be done by volunteers, it's not worth paying for, or anyone can do it. And I'd like to emphasize that, yes, it can be done by volunteer, but it is also a rewarding career, and it can lead to a very rewarding career, and it's worth being paid for it. So while, again, I thank all the volunteers, and so many groups and programs would not be able to run without the volunteer efforts, I think it's worth seeing how you can pay these people and pay them for their expertise that they bring. And not everything, volunteer can't do everything. If you want to have long-term programs, then you need to have people paid to do the job. And so I think it's a very rewarding career, and I'm going to tell you a bit more about what I do on a day-to-day basis, which is to run the program Discover the Universe. So how did this start? Well, actually, we have to go back to International Year of Astronomy in 2009. And I do remember, actually, at the time I had moved back to Quebec. I was actually on maternity leave when I learned about 2009 that it would be International Year of Astronomy. And getting in touch with Jim Hesser in Victoria and saying, hey, can I get involved somehow? At the time I was on maternity leave from teaching in Cégep, actually, and I really enjoyed teaching in Cégep, teaching mostly physics and some astronomy. But I kind of missed doing more astronomy, so I volunteered at first and then got hired. And if I remember right, actually, I owe that to John Percy, so thanks, John. And we started Discover the Universe in 2010. I guess the first workshop was given in 2011, but I really started working on Discover the Universe in 2010. And at the time, it was offered by CASCA, thank you, the RASC, and the amateur astronomers in Quebec from the FAAQ. Things have changed. It was a very small program. I was only working about 8 to 10 hours a week, I think, on this. We're doing both English and French, so it was very, very small. We went with online training. I guess it sounds innovative now when I think of it that we're doing that 10 years ago. It was mostly because we had no budget for me to travel. And also, I had young kids. I didn't want to travel too much. So we decided to go online and offer online training for educators. And then things evolved slowly and we're able to get more funding. But it was a long process. And then for many years, I was doing teaching in Cégep and running Discover the Universe. And things changed in 2016 when the Dunlap Institute adopted Discover the Universe. And I can only say thank you to Dunlap for doing that. It saved the program, it allowed it to grow. And it wouldn't be where it is today if it wasn't for the fact that Dunlap adopted it. And I wouldn't be here thanking you actually for that. So thanks a lot, Dunlap, for your support. And also CASCA is still supporting us, so thank you. And the CRAC, Center for Research of Astrophysics in Quebec, thank you very much for your financial support. We also get funding from other groups now, Promo Science and Trottier Foundation and different groups like that. So we're able to grow, which is nice. I was able to hire a first person over a year ago as a communications coordinator. I'll tell more about her in a minute. And we're just in the process now of hiring a second person part-time to help with creating content. So things are evolving slowly. It takes a while to develop programs, but it's fun. I enjoy what I do a lot. Most of what I do is online. So this is actually our website, our new website, and you can find most of our resources there. And you can see the click here for Astro at Home. This is our latest program, which I'll tell you in a minute. So on a day-to-day basis, what do I do exactly? What do I think about? Well, I try to think of, if I think of a concept, how can I best teach this concept to make it easy to understand while making sure teachers and students have a positive experience with science? So yes, I want them to understand the concept, whatever it is, seasons, phase of the moon, how big the galaxy is, and so on. So there's many things we can teach. I try to follow the curriculum, but it's pan-Canadian, 10 different programs, and actually more than that because, the territories kind of follow provincial curriculums, but it gets a bit complicated. So yes, I want them to teach, the teachers to teach some concepts, but I also want them to like science. I want them to have fun while doing it. Even if they don't become all scientists, that's not necessarily the goal here. Not everyone is meant to become a scientist. I want them to know that it's a possibility for them, but even if they choose not to become a scientist, I want them to have a positive experience with science and be able to know enough about science to make good decisions for society, for example. But anyway, what I want to show you what I do on a day-to-day basis as well is, do many things and create resources, some activity guides that you can see some of them here. Most of what I do is online. So this is me creating a video for a online workshop. Sometimes it's live, doing webinars. Sometimes it's pre-recorded, but people can access it online. And again, everything is English and French. And we do have some in-person workshops, and I really enjoy doing those. And it's too bad, with the situation, it's understandable, but we would have been doing one for CASCA again, 2020. We've been doing that for many years. And it's always a lot of fun to spend a whole day with teachers, share some resources with them, do activities, have different guest speakers, and being able to meet teachers is very rewarding. I usually teach online, as some of you might know now, it can be hard to always talk to your computer screen. So it's fun when I get to meet teachers in person. And some of those pictures are actually from the workshop we've been doing at Dunlap for the last 2 years. Again, this year got canceled. But we hope to do more because that's a lot of fun. So create resources, offer workshops, whether online or in person, collaborate with different groups, and I'll come back to that in a minute too. And as I mentioned before, my goal is not necessarily to, if I can inspire some of them to become scientists, great, and show them that it is a possibility for them, awesome. Mostly show them that it's a possibility and then they can make their choice. But my main goal is to increase science literacy. And I think it's very important. Like I said, I think it's important for everyone to understand the basics of science. And I think that's the antidote to fake news. And as we see now, with the pandemic, for example, fake news can be pretty strong, and conspiracy theories and so on. So if they understand enough the science behind, they might not fall for those fake news so easily. And I'm talking about kids a lot because that's what I do ultimately. Like I help teachers teach kids, but I love seeing nowadays that there are more and more initiatives for adults because adults are curious too and they want to learn. This is a picture from Astronomy on Tap in Toronto. And there are many great online festivals now or opportunities online or in person to learn as adults. And I remember when I became an adult, again, over 20 years ago, but I remember thinking, I still want to learn. Why are all sort of science programs for kids? Because I'm still curious. I still want to learn. And I'm very glad to see that nowadays we get more and more of those initiatives as well. And I hope the funding follows that. Promote Science, which is from NSERC, which is the main program for science promotion to get funding from, is meant for kids. Ultimately, you have to do science outreach to kids. But I think adults deserve to learn as well. And again, maybe teaching to adults could help as well in terms of fighting fake news. So anyway, this is a bit of a side story. But I mentioned that one thing I love as well is great collaborations and work with different people. And one thing that came out of collaboration recently is my trip to Iqaluit, Nunavut in February. I feel very lucky I got to travel to Iqaluit, Nunavut, and discover this part of Canada and go there and give workshops to teachers for 2 days. So this was actually out of a partnership with Ingenium, the corporation from the science museums in Ottawa and Actua. And they asked me anyway, it's a long story, but they knew I was interested in maybe giving teacher training in the North. They asked me if I wanted to go along with them. So the team you see there actually in the picture and the airport is Sandra from Ingenium and then the 3 people from Actua. And it was fun to go there with them. They had the contacts and I just kind of tagged along, got to create my own contacts over my own network, got to meet teachers. And one thing I learned, which I didn't know before, was that even though Iqaluit is not a very big community, it has a French school. So for the Francophone teachers over there to have access to French resources was great. So I did the workshops in English, but obviously everything I had, I could provide in French as well in terms of resources. So that was a lot of fun. And on a personal level, I love that trip. I've always been fascinated by the North and the cold and amazing white snowy landscapes like this. So for me to be able to go there was really, really on a personal level a great time. I got to see northern lights like I had never seen them before. So beautiful. I got to experience extreme cold. I love the cold. I'm the kind of person who's happy when it's minus 30 outside. But there I realized I have a limit. It got to minus 50 with wind chill. In the minus 40s without the wind chill, and then minus 53 or something with wind chill. And it was, a warning of extreme cold on Environment Canada. And when we took this picture here, it was, we only stayed outside for like 5 minutes. It was actually dangerous. Just taking our cell phones out to take pictures, our fingers were freezing. It was amazing. But I loved it. I would have been disappointed if it had been like minus 10. I'm glad it got to minus 50. And I got to learn that I have a mustache and that it can get frosted. So anyway, it's pretty funny. It was a fun experience. Okay, so let's talk about our latest fun initiative and crazy program, Astro at Home. So when schools got cancelled in March, I remember in Quebec anyway, the announcement was made on Friday, March 13th. They said schools were closed a week after. I think Ontario, it was announced the day before. But anyway, it was, it was on the Friday, thought about it over the weekend. And then on Monday, I talked to Lindsay, who's my communications coordinator, who's really my right-hand woman, I think would say, mon bras droit, through this adventure. And I told her, hey, how can we do this? Can we have daily astronomy programs for kids directly? Let's try to reach kids directly so we can, so they can have something while they're at home. So it can also give something for them to do that's educational and fun while their parents are busy. I know it would be a struggle for many parents to find things for their kids to do while they had to work at home. So we decided to offer daily programs in astronomy in French at 10 in the morning, in English at 2 in the afternoon, every weekday. We started that thinking we'll do it for 2 weeks and then we'll see, because that's how long schools were closed for to begin with. And thank you, Lindsay, for being with me through that. It was a crazy adventure. It kind of feels like we've been running a marathon. Actually, it was just like a sprint, a 10-week sprint. We've had 36 different speakers for a total of 102 presentations. We're still going, and we've decided it would end at the end of May. So the last presentation will be on May 29th. So every day, a new speaker in French and in English. As you can tell, we've had quite a few repeat speakers because it made it a lot easier to have the same people come back. We didn't have to train them every time on how to do it and so on, how we were working. The very first day, I think we reached thousands of people. It really realized that there was really a need for something like that. So the very first day we reached thousands of people. It was insane. And then it kind of settled into the hundreds live every day for quite a few weeks. And then it went down a little bit. And that's normal because there were a lot of other online programs starting, and online teaching was starting in many provinces as well. But it was a crazy experience and a lot of fun. So I want to thank all the guest speakers who presented. I know some of them haven't presented yet, or maybe they will by the time you listen to this. But anyway, it's great. Some of them were definitely repeat speakers. I did the count the other day of how many people presented how many times. I think I presented 14 times. And then we have Nathalie Ouellette and Frédéric Baron, who were able to do in both languages, so a total of 9 times. But I'm going to mention a few people. I hope I don't forget too many people. But Mary Beth from CFHT, 5 times, I think. Jessie from the Canada Aviation and Space Museum, I think 5 times. I'm not sure. Parshadi was also a regular presenter, Parshadi Patel, and Kelly. Thank you, Krista, as well. Thank you, Olivier in French, from director of the Montreal Planetarium, presented many times. Mike. Anyway, you can see many people from different organizations who collaborated and presented many times. So Dunlap was there many times. The Astrolab in Montmégantic, even though they had their own live programs on Facebook as well, Facebook Live, Nicolas came quite a few times to present different subjects. Anyway, now I'm so happy with this program, and not only because we had great speakers, but kids were able to participate live, because now I know it will live beyond the pandemic, especially in French. I realize this is quite a resource in French to have 51 presentations in astronomy that are adapted to a younger audience. We don't see that. So this is amazing. It's going to live beyond the pandemic. So thanks a lot to all of you who contributed, and for Lindsay, for helping me as well run all this. In fact, at some point it was getting so hard to manage all of this that Frédéric ended up helping us. I gave her a short contract to help us in the background, being host and connecting with guest speakers. It's been an amazing experience. I really enjoyed this. We had Dave Williams as well, the astronaut. That was pretty fun, and some speakers from the Canadian Space Agency. And anyway, sorry I don't get to mention everyone, but thank you to all of you. If you go to our YouTube channel, you can see the recordings for all of those on various subjects. I mentioned a few times that if we had planned 51 lessons to kids, we would never have done it in that order, but maybe that was the fun of it. Something that we're going from like gravity to space gardens to we met with an engineer who works on the Mars rovers and supernova. Anyway, it went from one to the other, right? And it was fantastic. And one thing I realized is that kids loved being live, and for them it was a community. Actually, we learned a lot about moderating a chat with preteens. Sometimes the discussion was going in all different directions. We had to do some discipline there to keep them on track. We wanted to make sure it would be a safe place for them as well. So we made sure they were not sharing personal information or, anything that could be like bullying or anything like that. So that was a lot of work in the background. But for them, they really built a community, and we have a survey now. They're filling the information, and some of them saying how for them coming every day was really feeling part of that community, which is nice. So in French, you can see actually the numbers are higher in French. I don't know if you can see the numbers pretty well. This was a screenshot taken, I guess, over almost 2 weeks ago for you when you watched this. And we're in the hundreds of views. So that's sometimes, just 3 days after we're reaching hundreds of views. In English, it started very big, but we were never as popular, I guess, in English as it was in French. And this is something that I find fascinating because we did a lot more publicity in English. And of course, the potential viewership is much bigger in English. But I kind of have the feeling, and this is something that I've experienced with Discover the Universe, is that because French resources are rare, they jump on them and they sort of hang on to them, and they'll share the information more easily. And, even today, when I record this, we still have more participants live in French than in English, and the number of views goes higher in French as well. So that's pretty interesting. And I'm just sharing with you some of the comments that we've received. This was pretty early on Twitter. Simple tagged us showing how, they love our webinars. My 12-year-old keeps calling me to look at the images here. That's him watching. And on one of the first talks that I gave on March 19th was actually to measure the Earth doing the Eratosthenes experiment. And this family did it, and they were impressed that they got, within 5% of the real value for the circumference of the Earth. So they were pretty pleased with that, which is really fun. Some people shared pictures and testimonials with us saying, this is a woman, actually, they watch every day. And she said her son now wants to study physics because he's fascinated with this topic and he's learning so much, and he really, really enjoys that. On a personal level, this was really fun for me. For those of you in Quebec, you might know Jacques Goldstein. He's the illustrator for the Les Débrouillards. And Les Débrouillards is a magazine. I was a subscriber as a teenager. It's been going on for many years. And Beppo here is the mascot for Les Débrouillards. So again, if you know Les Débrouillards in Quebec, this is probably pretty neat for you. It was for me anyway, that Jacques. He's actually an author as well, and he wrote a book called Les Étoiles, The Stars. So I invited him to come and present and talk about how astronomy inspired him for the story. And he was happy to come and present, and we had a lot of fun. He's such a nice and generous person. And at the end, live with us, he drew Beppo like this, sort of the brain exploding with astronomy stuff. And he sent me the color version later in the day, and that made my day. Like, to me, that was fantastic that we have our own Astro at Home, Astro à la Maison, or Beppo Astro à la Maison. Anyway, I think people from Quebec who grew up in Quebec might know about this. If you were interested in Les Débrouillards as a kid, or even now with your kids, this is really fun. This was one of the highlights for me for this experience. Just want to share two more comments that we got. This grandmother here says, it's in French as you can see, but she says that she watches it every day with her grandson who's 8 years old. But the grandson obviously in his own house, and then they phone each other and they discuss it, mostly with the grandfather. But to me, that was amazing. We're having this intergenerational, sorry, I have a hard time with that word, impact. People are connecting because they watch us, and that was fantastic. And another one, which I got just yesterday, she was asking me if they were going to continue after the end of May or start again in the fall. And because her daughter loves it, so I said, no, we're ending at the end of May, and then we'll go back to create resources for teachers mostly. And then she said, oh, she's so sad it's over. It's been a lifeline for something she looks forward to during this difficult time. Any chance you'll be offering classes kids can have access to. Thanks again. Thank you again for everything. It has truly brought joy to her life. And I must admit, it almost made me cry when I saw this. This is the kind of impact we're hoping to have, right? Positive impact in kids' lives. And we really did it with Astro at Home, especially during this difficult time. I know it's been difficult for many of us, with our mental health. It's been sort of challenged the last few weeks because of the whole COVID situation. So if it brought joy and something positive for families, it's so worth it. So this highlights what I love about my job is I get to collaborate with amazing people. And Astro at Home is one example where, honestly, I think I learned from every speaker that we had. You all had their own ways of presenting the content. And this is something I really enjoyed. It's like you all had your own style, and it was amazing to watch all of you. And I think I learned from everyone, that you're all doing great stuff, or ways of explaining a concept, for example. And I get to grow and be a better science communicator because I collaborate with so many of you. So thank you for having a positive impact in my life. And the positive impact as well is towards the people that we reach. When we get positive feedback from teachers who participate in our online or in-person workshops, and now the positive impact we've had for those kids it makes it all worth it. And it's very, very rewarding. Speaking of positive impact, I think astronomy is a unique field for that. Astronomy offers a unique view of our planet, its inhabitants and its resources, and I think this is an amazing opportunity, but also a responsibility. And I hope you've all seen this pale blue dot image before, where we see the Earth as a little pale blue dot in there, and it really gives us a different perspective on our planet. And I think astronomy, if everyone took the time to understand that, I do think the world would be a better place, because it does mean that we view the Earth differently. We're all global, we're all citizens of planet Earth. This idea of global citizenship, the idea that the resources are limited, this is a very, very strong message. And I hope to have a positive impact this way. To me, this is very important. And I've mentioned this in previous talks, but I do believe that we have a way to help the United Nations reach the Sustainable Development Goals. It might seem a bit far from astronomy when you first look at these 17 goals, but again, understanding the resource, having a better perspective of the resources on our planet and how we're all in this together, all part of this little spaceship in space, then it's sort of, I'm hoping this message can help people work towards reaching those goals and make this world a better place for everyone. So anyway, big goals, but I hope I can play a small part towards that. And I just want to finish with, if you are interested in SciComm or science communication as a career, there are networks where you can meet other people who do similar jobs and maybe get inspired and learn. Different associations, the Science Writers and Communicators of Canada, STAN, the Science Technology Awareness Network. I'm actually involved in that one. And to me, going to that conference really helped me learn about the network. Actually, it is a network, right? So everyone in Canada, who are the big players, who, like, talking to people, learning about what they do and learning about resources are available. That's extremely useful. In Quebec, we have the Association des Communicateurs Scientifiques du Québec. So again, it gives you sort of a perspective, mostly in French. And a few years ago, I was thinking about writing a guide for people starting in science communication and what exists. But I realized that someone had already done a much better job than me than that. So I'm sharing you a link there. You can go. I created this tinyurl.com/SciComm guide. It's a beginner's guide to science communication opportunities in Canada, written by the science communicator Farah Kaiser in Toronto. So I highly recommend you check it out. There are new opportunities growing every day. Maria Drought, I love ComSciCon that you brought to Canada. Thank you again for letting me be part of it the first time. So for grad students, this is an amazing opportunity. And anyway, check many of them in this guide as well. There's a lot more. Or reach out. I'd be happy to help. And I guess the piece of advice I want to say is make sure you find your own voice and your own passion for it. There are many ways to communicate science. For example, for me, I find that in writing, writing is not necessarily my strength. I much prefer talking to teachers directly. So find what you're passionate about, what you enjoy doing, your own way of doing it. We don't copy someone else. Like, try to do your own thing. You can obviously start as a freelancer or try to find your own, start your own YouTube channel if you want, or Facebook page or whatever. There are ways to start on your own, or there are growing jobs. The job market for that is growing, and especially if you're willing to go outside astronomy, if you want to go work in a museum, for example, there are many different opportunities, and hopefully you'll find something that you're passionate about. It was a long journey for me, in the sense that for many years I didn't know if discovered the universe. For many years I didn't know if it was going to survive. It's still not a long-term permanent job. I don't know what could happen for it in a few years, but it is a very rewarding career. I enjoy what I'm doing, and thank you very much. So I'll be happy to answer questions, and feel free to reach out if you want. Here are my coordinates. Thanks, everyone.